Hello everybody, good morning. This is Shreya Subramanian, a student editor at Lex Erudites. So without any further ado, let's welcome our speakers for the day. First being Gopika Murthy, an alumnus of NLSIU Bangalore, who completed her bachelor's in civil law from the prestigious University of Oxford. The Bachelor of Civil Law is a world-renowned taught graduate course in law designed to serve outstanding law students from common law backgrounds. The academic standard is significantly higher than that required in a first law degree. Only those with outstanding first law degrees are admitted. She began her career at Herbert Freehills, London, and currently practices as a dispute resolution lawyer at their Melbourne office. Our next speaker will be Advocate Kiran Manuka. He is a legal associate in Kasturi and Sundar Associates, and he regularly appears before the High Court of Madras. He completed his bachelor's in law from Shastra University and LL.M. from Penn State University under a full scholarship. He previously worked as a research consultant to Amnesty International India and also a legal advisor to the OHCHR. He is also currently serving the honorary legal advisor to My Story as a Woman Foundation, an NGO dedicated to promoting gender equality and addressing gender-based violence. Mr. Manokaran's area of practice includes arbitration, antitrust, indirect taxes, insolvency and bankruptcy, insurance and property. Sorry, ma'am, I had some network issue. Please begin.
No worries, please begin.
No problem, sir. Thank you very much, Shreya, for the very kind introductory words, and to Lex Erudites for organizing this webinar today, and for everyone who's made the time on a Sunday morning if you're in India, and some other time if you're elsewhere like me. It's a delight to be speaking here today, and Kiran and I speak for Kiran as well when we say we are happy to share whatever our experience has taught us with you today, which is Kiran and my experiences are slightly different, not just in terms of LLM, but also in terms of our backgrounds, the parts of the country we are from, etc. So hopefully you'll get a good enough mix here today. Speaking for myself, I'm from Trivandrum, so I was born and brought up there, did all my schooling in Trivandrum, and then I moved to Bangalore to do BA LLB honours at NLSIU, following which I immediately went to Oxford. So I didn't work in India in between, I went straight away. And after that, I've been working abroad for the last 4 years. So that's sort of what my legal journey's been. What we thought might be useful for us to cover today is sort of 3 broad topics. The first being the questions we had, and we think most people have when they are thinking of an LLM. Should I do it? Is it worth the time and expense? When should I do it? Where should I do it? Etc. The second is the more technical question of what is the process like? What do I need to do for admission? What do I need to do for scholarships? And finally, we'll close it out with what are the prospects that are available once you do an LLM, whether in India or abroad. I subject to Kiran's views, I personally am very happy to take questions in between as well. I'm happy for it to do it while I'm speaking, or if everybody wants to do it sort of at the end, or if the administrators would prefer that, that's fine as well. Kiran, do you have any comments?
I'm personally cool with both, but I think I'll just let the administrators take the call on it because they do have the burden of managing this issue seamlessly. So yeah. I'll leave it to their convenience.
If anybody has any questions, they can drop it on the chat box and we'll do it at the end.
Okay.
Perfect.
I think that'll be hassle-free, right?
All right. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Should I just begin with the sort of first topic? So I'll start on the first topic, and then Kiran can also learn on the first topic, and then we'll move to topic.
Sure.
So the first one is what I broadly labeled as questions in my mind when about doing an LLM in theory. Which is, we'll start with the first one. Should you do it? Should you do an LLM at all? This is a fairly personal question. Speaking for myself, like I never questioned whether I wanted to do one. I sort of took it for like in my head for some reason. I always thought I'd do a postgraduate degree, regardless of whether I needed it for the career I wanted, or even if it wasn't like immediately monetizable, etc. And that's different for different people. So I think there are, in my view, it's not mandatory or necessary for legal practice in India or abroad. It's necessary for it is necessary for academia. We'll get into the details of different requirements in India and abroad, but it'll be almost impossible for you to have a teaching career with just an undergraduate degree. So broadly, that's the career-wise, that's when it's needed. But more for you, like, are you feeling like 5 years is a lot of years of study, enough is enough? Or are you feeling like you want to explore a bit more? And a postgraduate degree, regardless of where you do it, will always be in more depth than undergraduate degree is. So for example, at NLS, over 5 years, you do 60 units. Some of those are of the same subjects, which are broken up into 1 or 2 units. But in Oxford, I did 4 units over 1 full year, while in NLS, I do 4 units in 3 months. So the amount of in-depth diving in you can do into a subject, it's much higher. So is that something you enjoy? Is something you want to ask yourself? Because if you sort of feel like I want to know it, but I don't want to really dive into the theory, I just want to get into the practice element of it, maybe an LLM isn't the right choice for what you want out of your interactions with the law. So that's broadly what I think. Is it worth the time and expense? Varies greatly depending on whether you're doing it overseas or in India. But I'm going to assume overseas because this session is billed as a overseas LLM prospect question. It is fairly expensive. The expense varies significantly, for example, between the UK and the US, which is where I did mine in the UK and Kiran did his LLM in the US. Personally, I did not even apply to the US universities because for me, I just felt like the difference in cost wouldn't be offset by what I didn't feel like the difference the degree offered in terms of my learning really offset the difference in price. And the UK had more scholarships. So for me, that I only applied for the UK universities. And I was very fortunate to get a full scholarship. And Kiran did as well, but our paths were different. We can come to that later. So in that sense, I personally did not have an expense. But I just want to say one point which my mentor at NLS told me when I was applying. It's this. If you start or if you do an LLM and you are paying from your pocket or you're taking a loan to pay it, I'm assuming your family isn't like covering for you or you don't have savings at that point. Then you are starting out your career with somewhere around 40 lakhs at least of debt. And what my mentor told me is that unless if you're lucky enough to be from a very privileged background, inevitably that will exert an influence on your career choices. Because every time you make a career choice, you will have to keep in mind that this is a debt you need to pay off practically. And he was very strongly of the opinion that even after I'd gotten into Oxford, that if I didn't get a full scholarship, maybe I should consider whether this is the right time to do it. Because you might want to do I'm doing a commercial law career where I'm fairly well remunerated, and that's fine. But if once you start your career, you want to go down a different path, like do you want this debt hanging around your neck, thereby feeling like you don't really have free choice to try different things at the start of your career, which is when you have the most flexibility to before you sort of box yourself down one path. And I feel like this is very contrary to the messaging I at least got in law school, which is sort of like somehow by second year you have to know what you want to specialize in. I mean, I still don't know, and I've been practicing for. It's been almost 5 years since I graduated, and practicing for almost 4 years. But it's this sort of pressure to know, oh, I'm going to be, I don't know, a sports lawyer or an aviation lawyer or something very niche by second year, third year. It's not realistic, and you shouldn't sort of impose those expectations on yourself. I would say, as a junior lawyer, if you have the liberty and the freedom to try different things. If you're interested in sports and you're interested in the law and you try some sports law, and actually if it's really fun for you, that's amazing. But you should have the space and the breathing space to try different things. This is my personal view. There are a lot of benefits of doing an LLM other than the career ones that I briefly mentioned and the deep dive into the law. I have made some really remarkable friends over the course of my LLM because it was a very international degree. And now I know lawyers in different jurisdictions across the world, which I find very valuable, not in terms of work or any immediate help that they are going to do for me, but just those friendships and seeing how different how their law degrees have differed, how their systems work, and just generally putting yourself in the mindset of a global lawyer, I found particularly helpful, especially because I'm working in an international law firm at the moment. Maybe I had a couple more questions, but I'm also conscious of time, which is the when should I do it, where should I do it? But maybe we can come to that after Kiran's.
Sure. Then that was quite an elaborative account on some of the conundrums in a law student's mind while pursuing LLM. So I think my perspective here would be slightly different because I was a student who, after graduating, just wanted to start practicing in the district courts in India and get a through and through 100% litigational career, original side practitioner. Basically, someone to whom an LLM is absolutely not required. So, for the career path I had in mind, LLM was not even in play. But what happened in my life was a happy accident where, through a competition, I got a 100% scholarship through my LLM. So, having gone through this route, my opinion as to whether an LLM is required depends much about your career choice. So, if you have a similar thought process like me, who wants to get into general civil litigation and do it in the conventional manner, and LLM, in my very humble opinion, is only going to eat away your time. Rather, you benefit much more by diving into the profession, start practicing as a junior advocate. The experience you gather there on field is way more beneficial to you and more relevant to you for what you have in mind for your career in a purely civil litigational point of view in the most conventional sense. But this type of a generalist practice strategy is quite rare. I don't find many of my friends opting for a similar career. I think the norm is becoming that choose a specialization, invest a good number of years, and maybe dominate that field. That seems to be the strategy of most of my friends as well. If this is what you have in mind, if you do have, find yourself liking a specific field of law and you see yourself climbing ladders within that area, then LLM is something that you must consider. Because like engineering a couple of years back, everybody finished engineering and they immediately opted for a master's. It almost became the norm. Nobody thought of it as an option. Much like what Gopika had said, she had also taken LLM as a granted choice that was inevitably to flow. So that is what is becoming of law degree as well. Most of the law students do take LLM as a natural step 2 of their qualification. So if you're going to pursue a specialization and if you already have the benefit of knowing it, of already discovering what attracts you, then definitely consider an LLM. It becomes a must. More so when you are considering a career in academics. It sort of becomes a requirement. So from general litigation to a specialized litigation to academics, it's like not at all required. It could definitely be helpful for your career, and it is absolutely required. So that is the level of necessity of your LLM for your different career paths, whatever it might be to the audience. That being said, an LLM abroad, overseas, would definitely carry more benefits than an LLM within India. The question there you will have to deal with is the cost versus benefit analysis, especially for the latter two career paths, specializations and academics. I would almost always recommend an LLM abroad, purely because of there are very subtle benefits to it. For example, number one would be the connections you make and the different type of experiences and exposures that you are given in an abroad university. My biggest takeaway from an abroad LLM was the difference in the method of teaching. The system followed in India, as far as Indian legal education is concerned, is quite different from what I experienced from a US law school. So these are very difficult to put in words, but you will definitely experience and benefit from these differences. And it is also good to know the spectrum of different approaches in pursuing education in this line. Then coming to when LLM, of course, Gopika had parked it for subsequent discussions. Maybe I can initiate it from my speech. Since both of us kind of did it soon after undergraduation, my personal take on it is it would have been better had I approached an LLM with a little bit of work experience. This is again a very personal choice to make, because this decision cannot just happen on when is the simply the best time to make. It also depends on where exactly are you in your career path, what is your family and financial situation, when can they support you. To many people, if we come from similar backgrounds, perhaps support from family and financial assistance is a more prominent option in the early part of your career, rather than putting it off to a later where you're expected to kind of stabilize yourself in the profession and start earning. But having said that, a little bit of practical experience, say at least 2 to 3 years, would completely change your perspective towards LLM. The way you approach your subjects there, your research, and even other subtle matters such as networking and making professional connections. As a student, I feel, this is again a very personal opinion. As a freshly graduated student, your maturity, or rather your capacity to approach these things, is a little bit limited. You have only seen these from a student's point of view. Once you do have practical experience and you've been working as an advocate or a lawyer somewhere, the way you approach the subjects and the people in the industry, they all tend to mature up a bit. It's just my feeling. And considering that you will be spending a lot for the LLM, and it's going to be a big investment, the better way to make the best out of it is to go with a little bit of practical experience, so that you already have an idea in your mind as to what are your interests, or rather what all do not interest you yet, and where do you need to focus a little bit more. These questions kind of, you get more clarity on these points with a little bit of working experience. So my 2 cents would be, do not immediately pursue for an LLM. Of course, there are benefits of finishing your LLM as quickly as possible and getting into the job market. But yeah, my advice would be to practice for a while and then pursue your LLM, by which time you would also know your specializations and your interests for sure, and maybe even which jurisdictions to pursue your LLM, either the UK or the US or any other part of Europe or elsewhere. Having said that, especially for a person who wanted to do general litigation practice, did an LLM have any impact, or has it been of any use? I would say yes, because as Gopika also covered, the depth at which you cover subjects, the way you dive into any given topic, you are trained to do better on these things. So even as a litigator, my approach to cases and my approach to topics of academic discourse, it is better augmented and more structured after the LLM. The level of academic scrutiny you're subjected to and the expectation built on your performance in LLM, it does grow you as a professional, as a scholar. So the subtle benefits that you do derive as being a better scholar, more rigorous scholar, will definitely translate into your work. So those benefits you do retain. And also in terms of the global connections you make, in any of these universities, they do have very good, excellent professionals from all over the globe coming to interact with the students who pursue the LLM program. If you make good use of it, if you start developing your contacts and networks with them, that is also going to help you in your career. So these benefits are very much present in whichever career path you choose for yourself, which is another brownie point towards an overseas LLM. So, if I could condense my overall sentiments as far as an overseas LLM is concerned, if it is a possibility for you, go for it, irrespective of your career choice, and ensure that you do get a little bit of practical experience so that you have in mind what exactly you are expecting from the LLM, such that you can derive those benefits once you're there, and not go there into the LLM and then try to figure out what exactly you wish to do. Yes. With this, I think I can again take it back to uh, Gopika's opinion on when the LLM can would be a good decision, because in one of our previous discussions, she did have certain contrary views. I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you, Kiran. So, like Kiran mentioned, I also did my LLM immediately after graduation. So, like just a month or so in between, just because of when universities in India finish and universities in the UK begin. I actually feel very conflicted on this question. For me personally, I do think that it would have been better if I had practiced a bit. So I agree with you in that sense before I did the LLM. For for one main reason. So the first main reason is that I don't think I went into the LLM knowing what I wanted to specialize in, right? So I had to pick 4 subjects, and I will tell you what I picked. I because I knew I sort of wanted to go into commercial, or not. I knew I was going to go into commercial law immediately after finishing the LLM, because I had an existing job offer in London before I started the LLM. So I was like, oh, I'll do commercial remedies, because I knew it would be sort of useful to know about remedies when you're going into a commercial litigation space. I picked insolvency just because it sounded interesting. I had not studied any insolvency, and I thought, oh well, this is an opportunity to try something new. I did children families in the state because, again, the course content seemed really interesting, and I'd always liked family law. Had no intention of practicing in family law then, or even now, to be honest. And finally did IP law because that was a subject I was very interested in university, and I used to write for Spicy IP while I was a student, etc. I really enjoyed most of these subjects, and I think I did make a good choice in terms of practicality. But the course I enjoyed the most was Children, Families, in the State. That was the course I felt like I got the most out of during that LLM experience, which was just like I only picked that because the dean of the university said you should pick something if that you think you'll never do anything else in, because this is the last opportunity then to like explore something. And I just think in retrospect, if I had worked for a bit, I still don't think I'd have perfectly become either a commercial law person or a public law person, because I think I even now want to do a balance of work in both. But I feel like I might have done, for example, I didn't pick civil procedure. But once you start working, you realize how useful it is to really like know civil procedure, even in depth, really well. Or I didn't do admin law because I don't think in my undergraduate level that was a course that was very enjoyable. But if you want to practice in public law, admin law is perhaps one of the most useful subject to do, other than like constitutional law, which is too different in an overseas setting. So I just feel like maybe my course choices would have been a bit more different. And commercial remedies was actually far more theoretical as an LLM course, which is good to know the theory of where all these remedies come from. But you don't really need that theoretical knowledge to practice well. So maybe it would have been better place to do like something like admin law where the theoretical knowledge could actually help. So in that sense, for me personally, I feel like I'd have made those different choices had I had the opportunity to practice even for a couple of years, maybe not 4 years, before I did the LLM. But the advice I was given when I was starting up was do it immediately. Like everybody I spoke to was telling me to do it immediately. And I think they still stand by that choice. And I think the biggest reason, and I've since been studying to qualify in other jurisdictions, etc., it is once you get stuck into a work routine, it is very difficult to shift gears and move back to a study routine. Like it's so much easier when you're in the flow of being a student. And when you're doing a 9-month LLM, like this 1 year LLM is actually only 9 months of coursework. It gives you very little time to sort of do that transition well. So I think that might be where they've come from, and maybe they were also people who were very clear on what they wanted in terms of specialization. So maybe their situation was a bit different from mine. So that's all mostly my thoughts on when you should do an LLM. But I think the one additional benefit of practicing for a bit before doing an LLM is just that, and this is maybe a shallow one, you appreciate the freedom of student life more if you're working for 2 years and then you go to study, which you definitely don't if it's just your 6th year of study, because you think, yeah, I'm entitled to free time, this is what life is. And it's not when you start working. Just to like enjoy that freedom a bit more if you work for a bit and then you transition. So those are my views on where to do it. As I said earlier, for me, it was frankly money that like sort of made the choice of whether to do it in the UK or US. I was only considering those two jurisdictions. So I now work in Australia, but at that time I wasn't considering it. Also, I knew I was going to work in London, so I thought, UK degree is perhaps better because I'm going to be there. And I had a full scholarship from Oxford, and at that time when I was researching, I felt like Oxford and Cambridge were offering far more scholarships and financial aid than the Ivy League universities in the US were, which was what I was considering at that time. So that's how I picked where should I do it. Yeah.
Funny that you did mention about your choices of subjects there, because I too am very guilty of very random choices of subjects. Just even I did it immediately. And I also knew for sure in mind that I wasn't going to stay in the United States. I wanted to come back to India and practice here. Therefore, I was on this quest of choosing subjects that would still have relevance when I came back to India. So it was everything international commercial laws, international conflict of laws, commercial arbitration, and on the other hand, international human rights and humanitarian laws and United Nations. So there was a point where my dean called up and had a conversation with me, like, interesting choices, but what's your plan? And I explained to him that I intend to go back to India as soon as I finish my master's, and I wanted to pick subjects only that could still be relevant back in India. So I think with a little bit of practical experience, I would have a better idea of where I would have invested my credits into, which nature of subjects that would perhaps stick well together as a unit rather than scattered across.
Yeah, because that makes it easier, the studying process easier if they sort of complement each other.
That's true. And just a quick comment on the difficulty in breaking work and doing LLM somewhere there. I think in all parts of career, there would be a kind of a breaking point where you really do need to take a break and take a sabbatical for yourself. So a friend of mine quipped when I was talking to him that probably the best time to do an LLM once you start working is when you're quite fed up with your work and you really need that break. Take a year off. It's just 1 year. Just go do an LLM in whichever stream that you wish to specialize and then come back.
And it's not a wasted year by any stretch of imagination.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent. So with that, I thought we could go into the process of application and what entails the thought of, okay, if I wish to do a master's in the United States or anywhere in Europe perhaps. So what would be the steps that I will have to jot on and progress?
Yeah. So, do you want me to go first, or would you?
I thought I would put it to you as a question and then follow up with the US perspective.
Sure. So as I said, I only applied to the UK university, so I can only comment on their application processes. I must say one big benefit of applying when you're still in university is that there is, or any university, UK, US, there is a lot of admin that goes into these processes. And it's not really fun. It's just something you have to do. It's like you have to be very disciplined and have a checklist and, keep ticking things off. And every university does require you to have referees, mostly academic referees, which is professors or other people who will write a statement vouching for your academic ability and general character. Some universities want professors to submit it directly to them. Some universities will let you submit, like you can get it on email from them and you can submit it for them. Some universities, they have to submit directly and you don't even get a notification whether it's been submitted or not, because they want it to be confidential so that, you don't get to exert any influence on the process. This is all, usually, professors are happy to give references and stuff. None of this is an issue. It's just that there is a fair amount of following up and chasing you have to do. And it is so much easier if you are still in college. Because if you're in residential college, you can literally, park yourself outside their door and remind them. Which when you're working is a lot harder because, you'll have clients and work deadlines and other things that are taking over your time. And if you're not in the same city as well as your professor, which can happen to a lot of you. So I studied in Bangalore, but I might not have been working in Bangalore. That would have made it a lot more difficult. Now, on top of it, if I was working abroad, then you are adding time zones into this mix, which makes everything very complicated. And on top of it, you will need letters from university. You might have your transcripts and other things. So hopefully all of that will be fine. It's just the admin is slightly more difficult. You would need to pre-plan a bit earlier. I didn't face it myself, but I remember a couple of years after I graduated, I think professors started saying they would only write references for X number of students for the same university. Otherwise, it was looking like they would have references for 10 students in the same year applying for the same, or in the same year, not this year, applying to the same university. But, currently studying might be asking them. Any year of alumnus might be asking them. Then it becomes a rush of who can get into the door first, and it becomes an administratively difficult process. So you'll have to start early and get into it quickly. In terms of the process itself, what I mainly had was I had a statement of purpose, written sample of work. And references were the main additional stuff I had to do. I had other things. You had to do an IELTS test. You had to fill in some forms. On online there was a form that you had to fill in. Some universities have a statement of purpose. Some universities will have questions with text boxes where you fill in the answers. So I applied to Oxford and Cambridge. Cambridge had a text box. Oxford had a statement of purpose. And the written sample of work can be something that you've previously published or haven't. That I didn't find that difficult because I had actually written a piece that had been accepted for publication that hadn't been published at that time. So I just basically condensed it to fit into the Word. So I didn't write something new from scratch for the application. which did cut down time, because otherwise you'll have to find out what is a good topic, is my research good, and I had done that thinking because I was trying to get something published. So that was easier for me. But otherwise, that's also something to consider. It doesn't have to be in any area you say you're interested in or want to study. Like, you're just looking at your legal writing skills. I don't think they care about the subject matter of what you write in. The statement of purpose took ages, ages and ages for me to do. And this is primarily for one reason. Because politics, I believe, turn on a statement of purpose. They don't turn on anything else. Therefore, you are not you. And for Oxford, for example, there was no separate application for scholarships. You apply to the university, and that's automatically considered for scholarship. So we want to write a statement of purpose that not only shows that you are a good candidate to be admitted in this program, for which is 1 out of 90, but you are a good candidate for scholarship, which is about 1 out of 6. So you are trying to, like, the odds you are working against now have significantly increased, and that's something like that took a lot of time for me to finesse, because I think what it should not be is a lister is your CV in narrative form. That is not the purpose of the statement. That's not what the statement of purpose is. It is not for you to say, I did X, I did Y, I did Z in these many years. You have to show you will use that. But you need in my sense, this is how I approach it. You need an overarching theme, a purpose. My purpose is X, and everything I have done till now has seamlessly fit into that purpose. Now, have any of us done life like that? No. None of us have thought, oh, we have a purpose when we start law school and done it. I mean, if you did, you are incredibly organized. I did. So it's more a purpose of, and you have to be authentic. So it's more of what do I really care about? Because I'm going to assume that most people have done things in law school because it's interest on some level. Even if it wasn't some well thought out plan, you maybe pick one mood than the other because you're like, I find this interesting. This, in terms of thinking, took a long time for me. I did about 19 to 20 drafts of a statement of purpose because I obviously couldn't like find out new stuff, right? So this is all the things, worthwhile things I think I've done so far. What is the common link? Is there any common link that like sort of prompted me to do these things? What was I think? So it was a lot of soul searching and questioning my own life choices for 5 years. When honestly, sometimes I feel like I just did it because I did that one mood because I could do 3 and like that sounded more interesting, or my friends were doing this. But like, obviously that's not the sort of and what I found is that I really was able to distill it down to that level. And since I did my LLM, I've like checked the SOPs for a lot of people. And usually when I tell them to do this, it sort of, you panic and you find it difficult. But if you force yourself to do it, they've all been able to find out a link. So unless so look, the only way you won't be able to find a link is if you've done something just because you thought it had CV value and you had no interest in it because you thought the link was to just do it. But I think that's not true for most people over 5 years. Like, you can't have done everything you did because somebody else told you it was a good thing to do. It must be because there was something about it you found attractive, and that is just a soul searching process. It takes time, but it's worth doing. Because I think like once I sorted that out, a lot of scholarship doors open for me, either partial or complete. And I finally ended up, so unlike Kiran, like Kiran said, it was a competition. Mine was just a full scholarship from the university itself, which covered everything, including expenses, etc. So that's the only bit of the process I think that's hard. With referees, only thing I say is don't go for the most well-known professor or the professor who has the most international prestige. Go for the professor who cares about you as a person and who you think, who is sort of invested in you. because they will do a better job of actually writing a good reference for you because they care about you and they know you well. That's my only advice because they want you to do well, as opposed to somebody who is like maybe very busy, very well known, but doesn't really remember you from class or something. So even if it's a sort of even junior professor, if it's somebody who interacts with a lot, who like cares about you, they are a better pick. And then keep deadlines in mind, keep chasing. This admission and this LLM is entirely your responsibility. For you, it is your responsibility to care for it. You cannot expect other people to prioritize it as much as you do. They will not, and they shouldn't have to. Is that's my whole funda on the admission and application process.
Right. I think in terms of the requirement, both the UK and US seems to be similar because all of this followed by the actual application to the university. You need to have a strong statement of purpose, letters of recommendation from at least two professors, and samples of academic writing. So these are the fundamental bottom lines of what one needs to apply to any universities in the United States as well. On top of that, naturally, your transcripts of your undergrads and your certificates, you need to have them ready and emailed to the universities as they require it. I think even before this application can be triggered off, the choice of university that you do choose for US, which I believe is also very similar to the UK, is that pick universities based on their reputation for the specialization that you have in mind and not just go by the ranking. For example, too often you find certain universities have a general, very good, sort of an average overall ranking, but specific programs in that university are extremely reputed and people do flock to that university for that specific program. There might be universities that are extremely reputed for commercial arbitration alone, whereas the other programs may not be so attractive. There are universities that are excellent for public international law. And so your approach to these universities must be based on their strength for the relevant program that you have in mind and not only based on the overall ranking, which is something that I find a lot of people get confused with. I really like this university, very good program, very good faculties, but the ranking is not so much. Will that impact my subsequent job prospects because the ranking isn't that good? So this would be my 2 cents on picking your university. Ensure that they have a good reputation for the specific program you go for. In addition to that, although the fundamentals of your application is going to be the same, your statement of purpose, letters of recommendation, transcripts, academic writing, ensure that each of these universities may have slight variations to this. Bear that in mind. Quite too often, students, while applying to a number of universities at a stretch, they have filtered 5 to 6 universities, they're applying to them in one length. They tend to not look at the subtle differences in the requirement and apply it in a blanket way. Although you have a common statement of purpose and letters of recommendation, ensure that especially your statement of purpose is catered to each and every university that you are applying to. There will be differences in the way you narrate your story and towards the program. There might be even instances where you're opting for a program A in University X and going for program B in University Y. Therefore, the story or the purpose that you wish to sell in your statement of purpose necessarily differs from the university with program A and the university with program B. Ensure that you do not make any mishap while preparing your application, even while applying for multiple universities. Make those distinctions very clear. And of course, the difficulty in drafting a very good statement of purpose, which is quite oxymoronic, if you would ask me, because as a law student in undergrad, you're expected to try different things and try to find out where exactly your heart lies. Whereas a statement of purpose expects you to already find what your passion is and speak as if the entire life you've been working towards that singular goal. Which, so you do need to get creative while drafting statement of purpose, that as Gopika said. It's all right if your actual experiences are quiet all over the place. Find out the soul-searching process on what exactly drives you towards the one purpose that you now think is your purpose. And craft the statement of purpose that way. And yes, the general cautions for letters of recommendation, which Gopika said also works for your US applications as well. Ensure that you approach professors who do feel on a personal level for your success and approach them. They tend to do a much better job, a more compelling letter of recommendation than just a professor of repute. And also a common doubt a couple of students do have in mind while I have assisted them in their application process is that can I actually approach so and so professor who's just a recent professor? Shouldn't I approach only extremely reputed people for letters of recommendation and extreme stalwarts in the field for these type of activities? Well, that's definitely good. If you approach a person who's already well reputed in the field and they are willing to give you a letter of recommendation, excellent, nothing like it. But I do feel that the importance or the emphasis is overtly placed. It doesn't matter if that person does not already have a stellar reputation, as long as they are a professor who do have sufficient number of years having a personal knowledge over you as a student, as a scholar. And if they are willing to write a good letter of recommendation for you, that is of value. They would consider that. Naturally, you cannot expect the admission committee to know on a first-hand basis every single professor that writes the letter of recommendation for you. So they are not looking for that. They're not looking for the extraordinary credentials of the person recommending you as a first-hand. Rather, their personal connection with you and how well they claim you to be. If that is persuasive, then that is still a very good letter of recommendation. Do not get deluded by running behind only extremely well-known persons in the industry. That may not always be feasible. On top of that, I think for US admissions, there is this thing called Law School Admission Council, which is more prominent for the JD programs, their undergraduate programs, but they also do have an LL.M chapter. So quite a few students who apply to US universities, especially to a number of universities rather than just one or two, they tend to go through this Law School Admission Council process. Just you can Google them. It's LSAC, LLM, and they have a login ID, etc. You can just feed in your details into that, and if you follow the steps, just through that one website, you can apply to as many universities as you can with a separate fee available for each of these. So from personal experiences of different friends of mine applying through this process, they find this slightly better and easier, considering the meticulous way you will have to prepare your application for each of these universities. Going through a system like this kind of simplifies your application process, for especially when you have multiple universities as targets. With respect to these scholarships, not all universities in the US do have it tied along with your application process. So in some universities, the application to scholarship is separate from your main application into the university, into the LL.M program. This is another factor that you will have to jot down while researching that university. And if the LL.M process, the scholarship process is separate from the admission process, start preparing for that as well. Quite a few times you do find people applying only for the admission, and while they are waiting for the scholarship, they get to learn that that's a separate process and the deadlines for that have passed. And speaking of deadlines, I think you do have to create a neat dates and events program as to which all universities that you're going to apply to, and list out the various deadlines for each of these, so that you don't skip any of that. It's a very trivial point, some might feel, but this is perhaps the most crucial starting step for you to be organized in your application process. Yes, with these few points, I think these are the general tenets that you'll have to keep in mind while applying to the US schools and hoping for scholarships in the process. But this is something, there is only so much that can be conveyed in this area while you still haven't started the process. You will learn much, you will get the right kind of information once you start the process, and perhaps speak to a mentor while you are at it, while you are applying to the various universities. So I think this is a good starting pack of information that you can have while considering to apply for LLMs.
I just had one additional point on the scholarships, which is that there are many scholarships which are not affiliated to the universities at all. So in India, there's so it depends on the university also. But if you're going to a UK university, there's the Chevening scholarship, which you need to have work experience for, but it's a government scholarship. There's the Commonwealth scholarship. There's INLACS. There's the Rhodes scholarship, although that's limited to Oxford. INLACS is broad, can be any university. There's the partial scholarships. So I remember I applied for the KC Mahendra Trust, which is I don't remember the monetary value now, but it'll only be a fraction of your LLM. There's two others as well. It's good to get because, as Kiran flagged, the process and deadlines for each of these will be different, and because these are not affiliated with a university, you will have to apply separately, and sometimes you have to put in references separately. So then, like, it's good if you're going to a referee and saying, "I need a reference for 5 things," rather than going to them at 5 different points in time, because you also get the process more disorganized.
That's right.
And it's also harder for you, I feel. Like then you just have to chase. So yeah, the way I found out a list of scholarships was because I was applying to Cambridge. Cambridge on their website on a funding tab had a list of all scholarships that is available for someone from India, regardless of whether it was sponsored by Cambridge or not. I think the only test was, does Cambridge accept it? So like the government scholarship would be listed. So that's what I used as the sort of starting base point to get a list of scholarships. But that being said, I had friends who studied in LLM with me from India who were on a scholarship I had never heard of before I met them. So it's an incomplete piece of information, but you have to start somewhere. So that's the only point I wanted to add on scholarships. And just the purpose point we discussed earlier, you don't find it intimidating. Look, you're not held to your purpose for the rest of your life. Like once you get it, right, if you change your mind, or even if you thought it was a lofty purpose for the purpose of the application, nobody's monitoring this. Nobody's going to come and hold you. So don't feel stressed now that I've set it in paper. This is the only thing I'm allowed to do for the rest of my life. Right? Like just relax a bit. It's fine.
Right. So the next question I kind of had in mind is, as far as UK is concerned, doing an LLM there, what would be the reasonable job market for people? And in terms of being eligible to practice in UK, is LLM even required as a qualifying degree, or can people enroll even without an LLM in the UK? How does that work?
I think that's a really good question. One I know intimately because I've been tracking this process now through my own experience in multiple jurisdictions. So the first and most important thing to remember or understand about both the UK and Australia, where I currently work, is that the profession is divided strictly into barristers and solicitors. Now, this division doesn't really exist in India, right? In the sense that you can work as an advocate, you can work as a law firm, and experience people might choose to go down this track. But a lot of people work in a law firm for a few years, then they move to be a practicing advocate, just because they want some savings before they take that plunge. Now in the UK, because these professions are divided, you sort of have to make a choice when you enter into the job. So either go down path 1 or path 2. There is very little cross movement. In Australia, there is cross. Everybody starts as a solicitor. So barrister is a court-going advocate. A solicitor is more. It does not have to be a law firm, but it's somebody who has client contact and does work for the client. And solicitors brief barristers who go to court. So the barrister's client is actually the solicitor and not the actual client. And historically, this is how it's developed. We don't have to get into the good system debate right now. Just understand this is how it works. Now, in no jurisdiction is the LLM a qualifying degree. Right? What I mean by a qualifying degree is a degree which, once completed, gives you full right to practice as a lawyer admitted in that jurisdiction. So law, as you're well aware, is a profession where you have to be admitted with the relevant regulatory body before you can practice. So in India, you will be enrolled in one of the state bar councils. Similarly, in the UK, you would be admitted with the Solicitors Regulatory Authority. In Australia, they also follow state-wide. So there's a state legal admission body you would be. LL.M is not a qualifying degree in either the UK or the Australia. Only the undergraduate degrees are. So by doing the LLM, if you get a job, you will still be working as a foreign qualified lawyer. You will not be recognized as a lawyer admitted to practice in England. That is sort of the biggest bar or hurdle I feel in terms of practicing abroad, because uh, most so then what you need is an employer who takes you on, and they also have some obligations if you're foreign qualified from the regulatory authority. And it takes about a year and a half for you to decide to get that admission. And it's a quite an expensive path. So they have to sponsor your education. You have to do it alongside work. And for the year and a half, you and they both bear responsibility for that conduct. That is the tricky bit I feel with getting, if you want to practice, that is the tricky, that's what I'm doing. But I guess the difference is I was hired in India, so the firm came to India and they hired me. So I guess they had already thought about this foreign qualified lawyer aspect, taking that on. They had decided for business reasons that he
Right.
was fine doing that. So I didn't apply for a job while I was doing my LLM or after my LLM. Australia was kind of different. I moved within the same organization initially for 6 months, and then I just asked, could I stay on, which because I liked it here, and that was permitted. But they said you have to like get admitted here. But this, and that was just because there was something they wanted me to do that was sort of became a part of my employment contract, saying you have to do this field paper. So that's kind of how it worked. So in both jurisdictions, you sort of would be applying if you want to solicit track. In
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt, but you're not audible. I think there's some disturbance in the environment. You're not audible properly.
oh, okay. Look, I can still hear a disturbance even after I go mute.
It's just that some parts of the sentences they kind of
Yeah, it's breaking.
Okay. Okay, so maybe why don't I go a bit more slowly? And if it breaks again, like just give me a heads up and we'll I can well speak loudly, I guess.
because the most part of the sentences are audible. It's just that while
Yes,
towards
yes.
tapering the sentences, they get muffled.
I see. I see. All right. Well, Shreya, can you give me a sense if there's anything I should repeat?
No. It's
Okay.
perfect, but
Yeah, perfect. So what I was saying was, if you wanted to be a solicitor, uh, you can still get a job. I have friends who have been able to find a job working as a foreign qualified lawyer and getting the firm to support them, even in large firms. So that is possible. If you wanted to be a barrister in the UK, you have to already been admitted to start that. And
Right.
which I know a few people who from my law school who have managed to do that. And that what they did was because the whole admission process takes about 2.5 years. They did their after their LLM, they did their PhDs in that university, so they were in that country. And while they were doing their PhD, alongside, I think out of their own expense, they did the admission process and they got admitted. And then once they're admitted, now they're in the same space as anybody who graduates in England, and they are applying for barrister positions the same as other people, and whether they get it or not is dependent on their abilities and competence. So that's the difference in the sort of job market. The LLM is not an admitting degree, and it does not confer any benefit also. That's also important. In the US, at least, if you are from a Commonwealth country, which India is, you are eligible to write the exam. You don't need to have studied in the UK. In Australia, it did the fact that I did LLM from Oxford did reduce some of the number of exams I had to write because I was given equivalence for some of them, which I know somebody who came straight from undergrad in India in Jindal to Australia, and she had to do I think 2 or 3 exams more than I did. So that is the benefit I got, but I still have to do exams. It's just I do a few less, which is the benefit. I'm not trying to take that away.
Of course, of course.
Sorry, can I just say one more thing? If you are interested in doing academia abroad, then the LLM, that's the pathway for which the LLM is the best suited, right? Because you don't need to be admitted to practice law in a jurisdiction to teach law in that jurisdiction. It's a plus, but it's not necessary. So a lot of people I know have done the LLM. Then most of foreign universities without a PhD, academia is almost impossible. So they've done the PhD, and then I have now are teaching as professors of law in many universities. So I know personally people who have done that. Obviously, a PhD takes somewhere between 3 to 4 years in addition to your LLM. So it takes time. But if that's the career path you want, that's the one I feel like it's the most straightforward out of doing an LLM. LLM is necessary. It fits in with the pathway. You don't have to really think about time and expense. If you want to be a professor of law abroad, do it.
Thanks. I think the situation is slightly better in the US in terms of getting your license to practice. Because even in the US, admittedly, the undergraduate program, which is JD, Juris Doctor, is the qualifying degree. And once you finish only with a JD, are you eligible to take any of the state bar exams, such as the New York bar or the California bar. But they do have a provision for international lawyers, those who do LLM. There are certain criteria, certain mandatory subjects such as their consti law, their CPC, CRPC, and a professional ethics course. So these are mandatory subjects that they will, if they choose to cover during their LLM, then they become eligible to take the state bar. So there is a window of opportunity for an international student to go pursue an LLM there, take up these mandatory courses as a part of their curriculum while choosing their credits, and then write the exam. So a good number of my friends are now licensed to practice both in some of the states of New York as well as in India. I think this benefit exists in the US law schools and jurisdictions as opposed to UK and Australia. So I think this was the only point of difference, because otherwise it was largely similar. And yes, even for academia, LLM continues to be the best gateway into foreign jurisdictions. And it's a very good step one into a university abroad, followed by a PhD, which, as you said, has become mandatory for any kind of teaching position. This also drags us to in our own India, where the relevance of an LLM as far as teaching is concerned. There are certain concerning notifications recently passed by the Bar Council of India, where 1-year LLM abroad would no longer be treated equivalent to an Indian LLM. And an Indian LLM, they've done away with 1-year LLMs. I'm not sure if the notification is through yet, but if it is passed and if it becomes a law, from that point onwards, it would only be 2-year LLMs in India, and any 1-year LLM in abroad will have to meet certain specific criteria for it to be an equivalent LLM in India. So the criteria goes like this. It should have necessarily been, the foreign LLM should have necessarily been obtained after an Indian undergraduation program, either the 3-year or 5-year LLB. And after the 1-year LLM, the candidates are eligible to be admitted as a visiting faculty in any of the Indian universities, and subject to them teaching for 1 year, after which the LLM would be considered as valid. So there is this one additional hurdle of LLM as far as teaching in India is concerned. For it to be recognized as a valid LLM, 1-year LLM abroad, go through one more step in India. If students do wish to come back to India and teach over here with the LLM. So yes, with this process, I felt that perhaps we could shift to, subject to your opinion, of course, we could shift to some of the Q&A. If you have any questions, we could get on with that. And I can come back to any points that have been left out.
I think that'd be good. Let's see if there are any questions from the attendees.
Yes. Are there any questions from the audience? Could you wipe out? Or, okay.
So does the admin grant permission? Shreya?
Shreya?
Yeah, just a second.
Yes, I think Wipeout card now has permission.
Good afternoon, sir, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, just a request. Actually, I am a final year law student from Punjab University, Chandigarh. So, in 6 months, I'll be completing my law degree, 3-year law degree. So, I am having a query that am I eligible right now also for doing an foreign LLM? Or should I take a 1-year experience in a job and then I should proceed? Because I think for foreign LLMs in few colleges, the admission process start from 1 year before only, like from September or August of the previous year. Like in 2021, I want 2021, I want to apply. So it has been started in August or September 2020 itself.
All right. Yeah. I'll let you take this one.
Oh, thank you. I was going to say that's right. Obviously, individual deadlines of universities will be different, but for most, for example, the US and the UK, the new year will start either in August or September 2021, and the admission deadlines would all be somewhere between November to January, February 2021. So you do have to think a year ahead, because there might be some universities where the deadline's still open, but it won't be too much time. Even if it is, it might only be like 15-20 days, and it'll be a rush to get it in if you're starting now. What do you think, Kiran?
Yes, absolutely. And even in terms of you preparing your documentations, it is advised to start at least 1 year earlier to the year in which you seek to be enrolled. And yeah, so if your plans were for 2021, yes, I think even the deadlines for various universities would have passed, even for the fall semester. However, if you could begin your preparations now in 2022 and 2023, you can target for universities. Actually, Shreya, if you could advise, like this Q&A session, can people post their questions in the chat box and you could tell us?
Yeah. We have a few more questions also.
I see.
I am just an average student at my law school, but have been actively participating in moot court competition and trial advocacy. Do I have any chance to get scholarship? If yes, then how?
Okay, I think I'll begin with this one because I identify with you, whoever the questioner is, because all my law school life I've only done moots. In fact, I was such a moot court addict. I think I participated in close to 12 moot court competitions. And even while doing my LLM in Pennsylvania State University, I still chose to moot. I represented the Penn State University in the Moot competition in Vienna. So, being an ardent mooter and having done absolutely nothing else, I too had this question in mind. I think the most sensible advice people could have given me when I was a law student was invest in publications. Moot courts are excellent. They are definitely very useful, even in terms of, in case you are choosing to pursue a litigational career. It gives you a good kickstart set of skills. But as far as academics and pursuing LLM is concerned, your legal writing skills and your publications speak much more for you. So if you haven't focused adequately on legal publications, then I would suggest that you get started. In fact, a part of your application process would also require you to submit certain legal samples of legal writing to the universities. This process is made much simpler if you are already in the business of writing legal articles and publishing them. By the time you start applying to universities, you would already have reasonable confidence in the way you write legal articles, and that would enhance your chances of getting into an LLM program with scholarship. So moot courts are good, but start publishing and presenting papers.
Only thing I want to add is that whatever research you did for your moot memo can be converted into an article, which is what I've done that. I think a lot of people do it. You might have to tinker it a bit to make it more adaptable for whatever journal you're submitting it to. So, for example, if it's an international moot, you might have to do some research to find the India element if you're trying to get it published in India, or make it more relevant topical. But look, it's research you've already done, and like it just like you just have to change it from the memo format to an article format, which takes much less time than trying to publish from scratch. And yeah, it does have more value. The only other point I would say is be realistic about the universities you apply to, in the sense that there are some universities, I'm not commenting on whether this is right or wrong, but they say that we will only admit students who are in the top 4% of their class. Now, this is maybe a status symbol for them. It is how they build themselves as, as a difficult university to get into, etc. But if they are saying that, they do not make exceptions to that rule because they pride themselves on it. So then you are wasting time and money by applying to that university when there are other perfectly good universities which take a more holistic view of your accomplishments. Yeah.
Okay, so there's one more question in the chat box. Suggest us some of the best university. When I googled the same, I came to know about King's College London. What is your opinion about that college?
Should I answer this question?
Certainly, please. At least from my end, I do not wish to comment on any specific universities on their credibility or their status. But I would say, if on a more general note, if you're looking to gauge whether a university is good or bad, do consider their global ranking. In addition to that, their growth in any specific field. For example, I think I could give very positive examples such as the University of Stockholm has very good program for international commercial arbitration. And then plenty of universities in Geneva, perhaps owing to the proximity to the Hague and institutions there, have excellent programs for public international law. So like this way, you can take cues as to whether a specific university is good for any specific program. Other than that, I think I would refrain from commenting on a general note whether any individual university is good or not. Over to you, Gopika.
Oh, I completely agree. All I was going to say is if you know somebody who's done a program at a certain university, try reaching out to them. Even if you don't know them personally, become seniors and colleges, they'll obviously have the true students' perspective, which might be different from what the grade person. Try to figure out that information if that is available. With King's College, I know I personally knew one person who went there. They had a great time, but that's very anecdotal. I feel like from the impression I got from them was that it was a great university and a wonderful program, but obviously asked other people.
Okay, so we received other questions like, will our participation in international moots, conferences and paper presentation increase our chances of getting into prestigious universities?
Yes.
Absolutely. In fact, I can speak of WIS. If you check out the WIS program website, there are even certain scholarships dedicated to the achievers in the WIS moot competition. So, very prominent moot court competition such as these WIS, the Jessup, Frankfurt moot court competitions, they have their own cult following. So there are plenty of organizations that do have an affinity towards these competitions, and they do extend scholarships as well to achievers. So yes, international competitions, paper presentations would help, and also specifically look for scholarships devoted to these competitions.
So the next question is whether one should start building their resume from early years of law school or when one decides to do LLM abroad or in fourth or final year. How should one start?
I think the question approaches it from the wrong perspective, in the sense that I think my undergraduate law years were the most rewarding years I've had as a human being. I'm not talking about resume building, not talking about um, what I got at the end of it. I honestly think law school changed the way I think about life and issues, and I think it should be a growing, like, learning experience. And I fear that if you start off with a I'm going to build my resume, you do not give yourself the freedom to try everything law school has to offer, and to really, like, it's a very formative age. You're like 17 to 21. um, so I feel like university should be about making the most out of life. And when it comes to that 1 year before you have to apply, whether that's in your fifth year or later, then you can always find a way to tie up your experiences to make it to to bring it together in a resume way. But if you start from I'm going to do my resume, you might end up with a stellar resume, which is what you aim for. But I am not confident you will get the most of it as a person in their late teens, early 20s. I don't think you get the full life experience that law school can truly be transformative, and I think you'll miss out on it.
I absolutely agree with Gopika. I think the only generic advice I can give you is to not stay idle. Sticking only with your curriculum at any point, be it fourth year, second year, or right from the first year, don't just stick with your curriculum, attend classes and ace examinations. That alone is not going to just cut it. Keep doing something.
Yeah.
And it is best if that something is something that you like. Okay, if you do not know what you like, for example, I early on discovered that moot court was my calling, and I still continue to coach students even after graduating and being a practitioner. So, if like me, you do find your calling in life within the law school's confines, keep doing that. Otherwise, keep trying out different things so that you enjoy doing at least one of it and you can really identify yourself with that activity. That improves you as a professional, as a person. Doing this would automatically give you a stellar resume. If you keep pursuing these things, you would automatically have a resume that you're very proud of. So rather than approaching it with an angle, as Gopika said, that I wish to develop a good resume, focus on yourself, invest the time on yourself, keep doing different things that make you a better law student, better lawyer, and that would fetch you a good resume that you're happy about to see at the end of the year.
And can I say, even if you invest in something more creative, whether like music or theater or whatever, and like even if you're a mature level, even if you're not giving concerts or a professional, you will still stand out from people who have just like done the traditional moot courts and debates, because you will be seen as somebody bringing like a breath of fresh air into the whole process, and because you like it, when you talk about it, that love will shine through because it's not fake. And I think authenticity is the sort of the best currency you can bring to all of these processes.
Exactly. That really helps you stand out in the crowd. This authenticity and love for what you do.
Okay, so the next question is when should one start preparing to apply to foreign universities?
1 year before you want to apply, as
Okay,
the rule of thumb, because
okay,
deadlines vary. Some, like, for to start in September, the deadline is for October before, which is almost an entire year before. So at least a year, ideally, like, keep track of deadlines a bit earlier.
okay.
Yes,
We
I
have
think
one.
just to carry on with that, I think just reminding the very first step of deciding whether to go for an LLM is LLM in what and LLM in where. And these questions that you can start researching on the universities or trying out the different fields at a much early point of time in your law school. So this is something that you already must have done before you can get to the technical aspects of applying. So the technical aspects of applying, getting your applications ready 1 year prior to whichever year you wish to study, I think that's cool. the other part of researching the area specialization and the universities, start from a very young point of time. Start talking to people, start reading about different universities. Do that much before you sit down to prepare your application. You should already know when, where, and what before you go about with the how.
Okay, we have one last question. What do I focus on once I get into the university?
Whew. That's a good question. I think, like, I don't think I did this correctly when I did my LLM, but in hindsight, sort of, it's for me personally, I did get very overwhelmed by the whole move to a foreign country, move to a completely new system of study, and just sort of making friends, fitting in, figuring out new currency, figuring out where the like, life. And at the same time, my coursework was very intense and it was very different from what I was used to in India, which was not true for a lot of people in my cohort who had either studied in the UK or Australia, because Canada, all of these universities are set up quite similarly. Because the BCL is a degree for people from Commonwealth countries, we didn't have US students in our program. So obviously I can't speak to how similar those two systems are. I think the one thing, if I knew I'd have done differently, is sort of just in the first week, because it's 1 year goes by so quickly and exams come by so quickly, is to find out what do I really need to do, like to at by the time I'm sitting the exam, what do I need? And I think if I had done that, I would have known that what I needed to do was not read every reading thoroughly and just try to like keep up, which itself was a big struggle. But that even if I did a few readings, if I had a nice summary and an argument that could be made, that was probably a lot more helpful, even if I didn't read half of the required reading. So this sort of thing I didn't know, but this somebody who had done it before, and usually there'd be students who had done the LLM who are still there for their PhD or another degree or whatever. I just feel like if you knew this in advance, then I'd have taken less stress that I wasn't doing all my reading, and I'd have been better prepared by the end of the line. So I think maybe just like reaching out to somebody who's done the program and just like asking them like, how can I best make use of my time? Because what you don't want to do, and I didn't do this, and I don't think, I know people do it, but I think it's the right thing. You don't want to spend, look, if you're 1 year abroad, you want to spend all your time in the library just reading. Don't you want to get the time to actually see the place and make new friends and have a full experience that is outside the library and your room? And if you want to do that, then if the LLM is not set up to give you that spare time, so then you should just ask somebody, how can I do both? And I didn't do that. And then like I panicked, then stressed at the last minute. But in retrospect, that's one thing I wish I'd done differently.
Okay, so
This question is best answered if you do take a little bit of time to work before applying for LLM, because by that time you would have a generic idea of what you expect out of the LLM, and so you perhaps would have an innate idea on what to focus on. On the flip side, if like me and perhaps even Gopika, you went there without a plan and just let's take it on. I literally went into, okay, I'm just here for 1 year. Let me try as much as I can. So the credit requirement for us was between 12 to 17 credits. And international students were advised to take it around like 14 credits or 15 credit max, so that you can, have a sensible life. I went all out. I did 17 credits during my first semester. I also participated in the WIS, and any WIS Murthy in the audience could testify what a lifeless life it would be if you are preparing for the WIS. It's almost 8 months of grueling. It's almost like a military camp where you keep rigorously preparing for it. On top of that, I worked as a research assistant to a professor. So I just threw myself into work, threw myself into different activities because I did not know what exactly would be good, and I did not want to miss any of it. So it is better if you do take some time and have an idea of what you expect from the LLM before applying for an LLM. Otherwise, you end up trying everything out or missing out on certain things.
That would sound very vigorous. Did you get any time to, I don't know, to travel, to sightsee?
So travel, I did not do much, but I did spend a lot of time exploring the city itself. So not beyond the confines of the state college. It was a beautiful place, and I did get a lot of time to spend with my friends during the weekends. And but yes, it could have definitely been a better personal life had I managed my priorities.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we've received two more questions. Is legal blog or article submission on websites like Live Law, Spicy IP, etc., considered as publications while applying abroad?
No, so I wrote for Spicy IP for 3.5 years before, while I was a student, so before I went. No, it's not considered as a publication. But yes, it was incredibly helpful in many ways. In terms of polishing my own skills, because if you're writing like 4 to 6 articles a month, then you just get better because somebody usually looks at it before it goes up. And like at the time, Professor Shamnath Bashir was alive. There
Wow.
were experienced lawyers, so they are sort of constantly checking your work. So you like, especially in the beginning, in the first year, so you do get better at it. Professor Bashir was one of my referees for that reason because I'd worked with him over 3 years, even though he had never taught me. And finally, and this was the best thing, I did IT at Oxford and then I did IT in the department in Herbert Freehills. And both my professor and the university knew who I was. They knew my name because they had read an article on Spicy IP. Now, I didn't have any publications in IP. And it feels, because they're like, oh, wait, are you this person? And you're like, wait, how do you know? Like, how do you? And it's not like, they read like one article. So I wrote 4 to 6 articles a month for 3 years, and they had read one article each. So it's not like, but a lot of them have subscribed to it. So if it sounds interesting, they read it and they're like, okay, I agree with your analysis. And that's, it gives you a bit of credibility in their eyes as well, and gives you a lot of confidence. So yeah, it was a very rewarding part of my life, but no, not considered publications.
And just to add on, that does help when you come into practice. So you start making a good reputation for yourself the more and more you blog and write on legal subjects, especially if it is going to reach a wide database of readers, such as in Live Law or Spicy IP. So your name keeps popping up. Your research is read by a lot of people in the industry and outside it. You make a name for yourself in this any given field. So it's a good habit to write, but does it help your LLM application? As it was said, it does it, not directly.
Not directly. Yeah.
Okay, so we have one last question to Kiran sir. Do you find LLM useful in litigation? Does it help you get a branding, especially when you have just started practicing?
There are perks. There are definitely perks. And even the way you approach your cases, I think I am doing significantly better being an LLM graduate, having studied abroad, as opposed to what I would have done just soon after my undergraduation. So if your question is, are there noticeable benefits that help you ride along in a better way, the litigational way? Then definitely, yes, there are benefits. If you're looking for some insane, extraordinary benefits, like I finished an LLM in abroad, so I'm probably, I should be getting an incredible pay package or incredible respect in wherever I go. That does not happen. So it best gives you a slightly better edge to navigate the challenges in litigation and perhaps I would say overcome them in style. But do not expect any extraordinary benefits that would flow from an LLM degree, as many people would, claim. So, especially in core civil litigation, you do need to manage your expectations. Your abroad LLM is not too much of a factor for recruiters while they consider your application. As far as basic litigation is concerned, you're still considered a fresher for such recruiters. despite your LLM abroad, despite your scholarship, and despite any other achievements. In practice, if you do not have prior experience, you are a fresher, no matter where you graduated your master's from. So bear this in mind, but you do have plenty of benefits. Your quality and the output of the work that you do is improved. At least it has improved from me after my LLM, and it does give you a better. It's more easier to connect with people. Oh, you graduated from masters from so and so university is nice. I had a professor. I know a professor from there, and like it just opens doors and opens conversations for you. So that way, it's helpful. And yes, so it better be with an extraordinary scholarship if you're going to pursue an LLM and then come back to litigation. Because if you're looking to cover cost in core basic litigation, it's just not going to happen. Yeah.
Okay, so upon special request, we have one last question. No questions will be entertained later on. So the question is, will any additional courses be benefit for foreign LLM?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand it fully. Additional courses at the undergraduate level?
Is this more of the plenty of online courses that are now available for students to pursue in addition to the undergraduate curriculum? My 2 cents, if that is like arbitration or maritime law, I'm assuming these courses are again pursued online from various institutions that offer these programs online or through postal education method. So these are, I think, the course itself is catered towards a more practice-oriented approach. So it is beneficial for practitioners to take up these courses to augment their skills in that specific field. For LLMs, I do not think they reap any good benefit and enhance your CV in any way. There are certain situations like summer school programs offered within your universities where you already pursue a 1 month program abroad or a 6 month program abroad. If you're referring to those type of additional courses, like in exchange programs or international school organized within their university, I do have certain friends who pursued that and found that helpful in their LLM application process. So it's your window of already being an international university, and also you get to know and expect what you can and will be exposed to in a university abroad. So to that extent, it will be helpful for you while you're applying to LLM. On the other hand, if you're referring to the online courses, I don't think they pack a punch in your CV for LLM applications.
I agree. I don't have much more to add. I
Right.
must say, those who have done an exchange, a couple of my friends were able to get some of the professors who taught them over the 6 months there to be one of their referees. And even though they didn't apply to that same university, I think it carries a lot of weight.
Excellent.
With the universities they applied for, because they were well known in that jurisdiction, or better
Right.
than Indian law. So I mean, that's an allied benefit as well. So, but I mean, that depends on your relationship with the professor during the exchange, etc.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's the best you make for yourself with these opportunities.
Okay, thank you so much, both of you. Now I call upon Advocate Akhil George sir, our Editor-in-Chief, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, Shreya. And we finally come to a wonderful session. And before moving on to my official duty of conveying gratitude on behalf of Team Lex Erudites, I would like to share a few comments on the participant perspective. This session by Gopika and Kiran was more like a conversation with our senior friends who are trying to advise and guide us so as to secure seats in prestigious overseas universities. And both the speakers, Gopika and Kiran, have addressed almost all the concerns and dilemmas which are faced by most of the law students and young lawyers who are desirous to do LLM abroad, just like how to apply, what are the scholarships, how to choose the college, how to write an SOP, how to build your resume. So many concerns have been addressed by both the speakers very lucidly. And the advantage what we got is that Gopika have done his masters from the England, and Kiran have done his masters from US. So we got a perspective of two different countries, the approach which is made by two different countries. And apart from that, they are also working in different sectors. Wherein Gopika is right now working in a corporate firm in Australia, wherein Kiran has come down all the way from US to India, and he is flourishing his practice in Madras High Court. So overall, the participants have got an experience of myriad experiences shared by both the speakers, and it was more of an informal session and a very honest session, wherein I remember Kiran saying about the SOP, saying that what you really feel in the heart would not be the one which is reflected in the SOP. Wherein Gopika added by saying that, see, the SOP is not an agreement. You always have the liberty to change the purpose which is stated in the SOP. So I felt that it was a very open, honest conversation by both the speakers, very interactive session. And coming to my formal duty of conveying a gratitude, I should say that when the first time the team Lex Erudites accosted both the speakers, they were more than happy to be a part of this webinar, wherein we were not compelled to make an effort to persuade both these wonderful speakers, wherein they were ready to give this lecture to help those people who are in dilemma or concerns with regard to doing LLM abroad. So I take this opportunity to convey the gratitude on behalf of Team Lex Erudites to Gopika and Kiran. Thank you so much, Kiran, for coming to our platform, spending your valuable time for this webinar. And I also hope that both Gopika and Kiran will be with us in our future endeavors also. Thank you so much once again, Gopika and Kiran.
I mean, it we still need a platform where people can congregate and ask these questions. And for us, I have an opportunity to create it as well. Otherwise, like ad hoc, I'm sure this is true thing also. We've done this over the years with like friends who are our juniors, or somebody like calls us and says they want to talk about this, but it's usually not this structured, and it's very one-on-one. And this is so useful because, you know, it's a group, so people can learn from other people's questions. You've got Kiran and me who have got differing experiences, as opposed to if you reached out to just one of us, we'd only be able to cover half the picture. And also, there might be students in universities where they don't personally know seniors who've done these overseas LLMs. So I think it's really nice that you organized, you and the entire Lex Erudites team have organized something like this. And thank you from my part for inviting me.
I absolutely echo whatever Gopika just said. I do wish that I did have access to such kind of people speaking about their experiences of LLM when I was still an undergraduate student. And it's very great that you take up this initiative for the best of all law students, and that too when the administrators themselves are law students. I think this is a fantastic initiative. I really do think that I should have been at least half as active as you all are when I was a law student. So, and thank you for reaching me and having me here. It's very kind of you for you to give me an opportunity to share what my personal experience with all these students. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.